Hello and welcome to another Coach Chingus video. As you can tell from the title of the video and the fact that I'm sat next to a gravestone, today's topic of conversation will be the joyous how to deal with the passing on of loved ones. So you know me, Coach Chingus or Alex. This is my brother Ben. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself? Yeah, he's never really been talkative. But anyway, moving on. So, long story short, my brother was essentially my father figure when I was growing up. I didn't have such a good relationship with my dad, and he was my eldest brother of 15, 16 years older than me. And he took it upon himself to become my father figure, essentially. And a couple of years ago, I received a phone call at 1 a.m. to tell me that he tragically passed away in a car accident. And once the initial grief had subsided and the shock, I immediately got on my knees and started crying. And the first question that came to my mind was, why? Why has this happened? Why did you do this? Bearing in mind at this point, I was a fledgling in my spiritual journey. I'd only just started going to church, developing a relationship with God. But I felt comfortable enough to ask him, why? Why have you done this? Of all the people, of all the ways, why have you taken my brother away from me? And this is natural. This is a natural response. And you may see this as sort of questioning my faith. And it is. It is questioning my faith. And the reason I say that is because one of the most difficult parts of the Christian journey is to fully accept that everything that happens, God has permitted and is good. There's a reason it happened. Obviously, when you're in the initial stages of grief, that is hard to reconcile with, thus the question, why? Now, in terms of how I dealt with this over the course of the last couple of years, it has occurred in numerous stages, and the exact timeline I'm not too sure of, but I'll try and keep it relatively in order. So, the first 6 months were horrible. They really were. Lots of outbursts of emotion, sporadically, just out of nowhere. Lots of lamenting and pondering my faith, especially, and the notion of death as well. Because what I'd realized from this experience initially, and this is one of the most profound moments in my spiritual journey, is how transient life is. How you can be taken away like that at any moment. And that's one of the things that the spiritual fathers discuss in great depth, is that we should be contemplating death regularly. And it wasn't until that moment that I actually started thinking to myself, I'm going to die one day. It could happen tomorrow. Right now, I'm not spending my time anywhere near as wonderfully as I know I should be. But that's for another part of the story. So in the initial stages, I took it upon myself to allow myself to feel every emotion that was arising. And this may seem normal. This may seem like everyone does this, because people, they cry, they shout, however they respond to it. But that's merely dealing with the surface level manifestation of the emotion. And what I mean by that is, when something traumatic like this happens, you are instantly filled with trauma, with emotions that are trying to get out. But more often than not, we kind of suppress them for the most part. You know, you don't want to burst out crying in the middle of the street or at the dinner table with strangers or whenever. So we tend to keep it bottled up most of the time until it gets too much and we have random outbursts of tears or we get triggered by something. But I took a different approach where I spent a lot of my spare time just sitting in silence and letting myself feel the pain, which is horrible. I can't lie. It's not a pleasant experience, but I found that it was at utmost importance to me in order to conquer what had happened, because these things are going to happen in your life. You will meet tragedy. People you love and cherish will die. They'll be taken away from you in a manner of different ways. And I'm not telling you this in order so that you forget that it happens. I remember my brother every single day. I miss my brother every single day. But there's no longer a strong emotional charge to his passing. And that's not because I'm a sociopath. It's not because I've suppressed all those emotions. It is because I have gone through each and every stage necessary to address every emotion that arose as a result of what had happened. And I've let go of it. So now all I'm left with are beautiful memories of a wonderful man and a new lease on life where I wish to use this experience to better propel my own life forward so that I can spread as much positivity and joy in my range of influence. And that's the first step. Let yourself feel every emotion and do not suppress it. There's a time and a place, understandably, right? You don't want to be sat in the middle of the office doing a trauma dump and crying. But talking about these things, it helps relieve some of the pressure. If you think about it as, trauma being compressed emotion within you, and talking and crying and punching a pillow, you're just letting off a bit of the steam, a bit of the excess steam, but the emotion's still there, all right? So let yourself feel the emotion. Take some time to sit and lament and contemplate death and all of the emotions that arise, and let yourself feel it. And I literally mean feel it. Don't just think about it. Let it take over you. We all know how it feels to feel upset, angry, dejected, resentment, despondent. But we don't let ourselves actually experience the emotion. We just push it down and think about it, and we let the tears out, or we talk about it non-stop. Do that, but also take the time to process what has happened. That is the most important step. And this is not something I'm exactly proud about, but the amount of times that my friends and my family members would say to me, like, how have you dealt with this so well? I mean, at the time, I wasn't really sure. I didn't really know what I was doing when it first happened. I was kind of just following what I thought was the right thing to do, letting myself feel the emotions. But they were so surprised as to how I managed to get through it. And in fact, when I even mentioned that I was going to make this video, they all kind of turned to me like, how? How are you able to talk about it so casually? And it's because I've processed most of the emotions. I'll get into that, why I'm saying most now. But I've processed most of the emotions. I can talk about this without feeling upset because that emotion of sadness is no longer in me. The memory is there, but the emotion is not tied to it. And it's because I let myself experience everything. And sometimes that takes thinking. Sometimes you have to think about why it's sad. But you can't do that unless you really take the time to sit with yourself in silence, unstimulated, no music. Actually, scratch that. Listening to music that reminds you of the deceased will help bring out that emotion. In fact, I used to play the song that I chose for his funeral. I used to play that all the time and just sit there and cry and feel everything that I needed to feel. So that's the first step. Let yourself feel the emotion and allocate time and intention to letting yourself feel it. I cannot stress the importance of that enough. And all of this should be done under God's care. Prayer. Prayer is of utmost importance here. To ask God, help me face my emotions. Give me the strength, give me the courage to face my emotions head on. Because we don't like feeling these emotions. It's horrible. It sucks. No one wants to feel upset. No one wants to feel anger. No one wants to ponder the fact that someone they love so much has passed on. But you have to. It is so, you have to. And this applies to everything, not just the passing on. I won't get into that now, but this applies to everything. So that's the first step. And the second step, which is hard to sort of give like, what is this step, how to actually do this step, but it's sort of something you keep on the back burner as you go about life, because there will be moments where you're triggered. Something will remind you of the deceased. For me, it was seeing a certain type of car, because that's the car he used to drive. And I used to hate getting on the road because of what had happened. But I realized that I was getting triggered by seeing a certain car, and you have to use that. Okay, I am being triggered because of this certain car, and take that, lament on it. Repeat the same process of letting it's like, why this car? And just think about the car. Think about the emotion that rises when you think about the car. Right? This isn't as simple as person dies, I'm now sad. There are so many dots to connect and facets to tackle this from, that you have to be open and receptive to absolutely every emotion, every memory that arises, because it's your mind trying to tell you something. You know, for the most part, I dealt with the overall sadness towards his death, but then there would still be moments where I'd see his beautiful daughters and I'd get upset because they no longer had a father. I'd see his car and be reminded of how he actually died. You know, there's so many different aspects to this. And that's the second step, is to sort of be aware of when these triggers come to your mind, because they will. And never think that you've fully gotten through it, because you will get caught off guard. There's a mistake I've made multiple times where I thought, no, I've dealt with this trauma, I've dealt with the emotions, blah, 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 it's all good. And then I get blindsided by something. I don't know what it is. I don't consider it to be related to this because I've dealt with it. How wrong I've been. So second step, always be open to being triggered. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but triggers, the way I see triggers, they're telling you something about yourself. If you have emotional response to anything, a negative emotional response to anything, it's your mind telling you that there's something you haven't addressed yet. And it's usually in the aftermath. So this is after 6 months for me now. The next, I guess it's ongoing, to be honest, but I guess in the first sort of year, so the first initial 6 months was just getting through that initial emotion related to the death itself. And then after that, it was sort of me being fed these random emotions and memories that would just pop out of nowhere. And it's going through the same process of letting yourself feel those. And to move on to the third step, this is more of a practical step, but when someone passes on, there are going to be a lot of unreconciled experiences between the two of you. I'm not going to go into much detail in this video, but you know, as my father figure, he made mistakes. We all made mistakes. And I couldn't address them anymore because he was gone. I couldn't talk to him and say, bro, why did you do this? This made me feel this way. I couldn't do that anymore because he was gone. And this left a bunch of unclosed emotions that were just spiraling in my head. And I didn't realize this until certain times that I'd get triggered and think, okay, why do I feel this way about myself? I can give a soft example here. I used to heavily identify with the fact that I was lazy. I used to think, I'm a lazy person, I'm very lazy. And upon going through the process of addressing that and thinking about why that's there, it came to him. You always used to call me lazy, man. Why? But it's things like that that need to be addressed as well, because if that's just left, I could have gone through the rest of my life just carrying this identity of laziness with me because I hadn't addressed it with my brother. And the way I did that was to write him a letter. In fact, I've written him numerous letters over a variety of different topics, but to stay on this example. And I just expressed everything that I wanted to express to him regarding this one thing. Why did you do this? I feel this way. That made me think that this, and all sorts. And what that does is it allows you to get it out of your system. It allows you to get everything out of your system. And you can do this for every emotion you've got towards a person. And it doesn't have to be the bad. You know, I've written happy letters as well. I've celebrated his life. I've written apology letters. I've made numerous mistakes that I haven't apologized to him for. And I have to get those off my chest by writing a letter. I'm sorry I did this. Can you please forgive me? I'll do better going forward. It's like you want to treat him as he's still there. My brother's still here. You know, he's not an invisible ghost that's kind of floating around, but he's still here. You know, his picture's there. I can see that picture saying, that's my brother. He's still there. His physical vessel may not be walking around, but his memory, his soul, he's still here. And I talk to him, whether out loud or when I visit the grave, but mainly through letters, which once again I engage in prayer while writing, because I feel as though God, keeping a communion with God as I'm doing it, helps me to sort of connect with his soul at a deeper level. But ultimately, you know, writing letters, and that can be hard as well, because I said some things in those letters that I really despised. I would never show anyone these letters, but it was what I had to do, because I had that emotion trapped in me, that emotion that was leading me to say certain things or write certain things about him. I had to get it out, because I don't want to hold resentment against someone that I can't see, I can't be with anymore. It's like I'm holding resentment to air. And that eats you up. That anger, resentment, bitterness, it eats you up unless it's let go of. And you let go of that by writing letters, by letting yourself feel the emotion, let yourself experience that emotion. That was so difficult for me, to feel angry at someone that I loved so much and had passed on. That's a very conflicting space to be in. But afterwards, I felt so liberated. I felt so liberated from that emotion, and it better allowed me to move on. And what these steps lead to, and I know I haven't exactly delineated concrete steps, but I hope you kind of get the idea of what I'm trying to make out here, is what this leads to is that you're better able to see the good in the situation. And bear with me when I say this. This is going to sound quite outlandish, but at this point, I'm grateful that my brother has passed away. Am I happy that he's dead? No, that is not what I mean. But what has transpired as a result of this happening? I can only speak for myself. Honestly, I know those around me that are close to him are still suffering with their pain. But as a result of this, I've grown so much closer with the rest of my family, with his daughters. I'm trying my best. You know, I got a car and I was able to experience so much more in life because I wanted to see his daughters as much as I could, and that allowed me to go places that I'd never dreamed of going to before. I quit my job because this happened, because of the transience of death that I mentioned earlier. I realized that the 9-to-5 office job for me was soul crushing. I said, I've got so little time in this planet, on this world, yet I'm here doing something that I despise for 8-10 hours a day. To what end? And then I'd go home and just play video games or do whatever, and it's like I realized my life was just falling apart and I had nothing to show for it. And if this hadn't happened, I wouldn't have taken my leap of faith to get my own coach to help me build what is now my own business, my own coaching program, where I can take every experience that I've gone through, whether it's the loss of a loved one, whether it's addiction, whether it's poor mental health, and help you guys get through it. And I really don't want to say you have to crack a few eggs to make an omelette, because that's not how it works. It's not like God didn't point at my brother and say, you're now wiped out so this could happen. That's not how it works. But it goes to show that silver linings can be taken from any situation, providing you have dealt with the emotions behind them. Otherwise, you're still just going to see the sorrow in the death itself. And I see a lot of people rationalize, say, oh, he's in a better place. He's in a better place. He's with God. He's in heaven. Yeah, that's true. You can rationally say that, though, and you can speak the words, but do you actually believe it? I didn't believe it until I'd gotten rid of most of the negative emotion. And that's why it's so important. Because now I'm no longer living in grief that my brother has passed on, but I'm living out of love for what he left me with and the experience that he left me with, the trauma that arose from that, switched something on in my head that has allowed me to get so much closer to God and experience so many different things in life that otherwise wouldn't have happened. I'd still be at my 9-to-5 job right now, slowly deteriorating spiritually. I wouldn't be close with my nieces, my other brother, his daughters, my mum, to some extent my father as well. It really highlighted to me the importance of family, which once again people say, but they don't emotionally accept and they don't do anything about it for this reason. It's so many emotions, but an inability to address them, or a reluctancy to address them, will just keep you stuck in the same place, the same place of grief or anger, resentment, whatever emotion it is. You'll stay stuck there. And I've been meaning to make this video for a long time. This has not been scripted or structured, as you could probably tell. However, this was a cathartic experience for me to talk about this, because I've gone through the motions of having conversations with people about this in person, but to actually get it off my chest, like what this has allowed me to accomplish. And I know it's quite an outlandish opinion to sit here next to my brother's grave and say I'm grateful that you're dead. That sounds like such a horrible thing to say, but please don't misconstrue that as me being happy that he's dead. I'm grateful to God for the experience, or in fact I'm grateful to God for allowing me to extract goodness from the experience. There we go, that's a better way of wording it. I would trade this all for him to just rise out of this grave right now. Don't get me wrong, I'd go back to the 9-to-5 if it meant I could have my brother back. But that is not the way the world works. He's gone. I have to emotionally accept that and take every amount of good that I could from it, so that I could be there for his daughters as much as I can. I'm not trying to replace him, but yeah, I'm better able to be there for them, my mum, my other brother. I had to push through mine as fast as possible so I could help others through their own grief. And you know, I sit here now in a world that I once thought was unfathomable, and this was the first domino that collapsed. And you know, glory to God. And I know he's in a better place now, and I've emotionally accepted that, and I'm happy where he is. It was his time. He's now with God, In what form that takes, I don't know. I know he's not in some pearly, golden, gated, cloudy castle, but in one form or another, he's with God now, and he's at peace. So I hope this has been somewhat useful, if not helpful, and yeah, please feel free to reach out if you're going through something similar and you're not sure how to process the emotions or how to move on, because it is hard. I'm not going to sit here for 1 second and tell you it's easy, but it's necessary. Otherwise you're just going to stay stuck. But thank you for watching. I really hope this has made sense. God bless, and I'll see you soon.